Hello, and welcome to episode 12 of the Brand Burger podcast. I'm your host, Braden Matson, strategy at Storybook Marketing. Today, we're talking about brand versus performance marketing, which is the most ridiculous dichotomy that has come out of marketing in the digital space over the last few years. Today, we're going to talk about why brand versus performance is just not a thing at all. We're going to talk about how to deploy brand marketing and what I would call direct response or sales activation. In other words, how to do long-term and short-term at the same time. We're going to talk about why performance marketing is the dumbest term since the internet and how it leads marketers and executives in the wrong direction. And we're also just going to touch on the research-backed case for brand and brand marketing. We obviously will not cover everything because it's a large swath, but just to close things out, we'll touch on some of the sources to justify the importance of doing long term alongside the short term. So, the first thing to say is that this kind of so-called dichotomy or this versus that you'll see in marketing headlines of brand versus performance and long-term versus short-term, it's complete nonsense. And it paints a very absurd picture, which is that you have to somehow choose between these two competing things. This is absolutely not the case, and it's totally erroneous and just ridiculous. Brand and performance, and I don't even like the term performance. If you just think of it as long and short, to use the Binet language, or even above the line and below the line to go back to the 50s at P&G, the point is that these two work together. They are the same coin, they are not different coins. They're the same coin and they work together simultaneously, and you should do both at the same time in varying degrees. When you are a new brand, sometimes a higher spend on direct response makes more sense. And as you get bigger, or if you're the category leader, a lot of your budget, if not most of it, is going to go towards brand. That's fine. There's a split between the two. But the long and the short, the brand and activation, are not different things. They are different in certain ways, but they are one of the same overall driver of performance, which is the irony around the term performance marketing, which we're going to talk about. But what I'm getting at here is that this is one thing just with flip sides. They are different a little bit conceptually, and they are measured a little bit differently, which we can touch on. But the point here is to just drill home that brand and performance are not competing, right? They might compete for budgets in an organization, but that has everything to do with how messed up your company is internally. It has nothing to do with the importance of brand and activation. They work together and they should be done at the same time. So that's the first thing to drill home here. And anytime I see an article or someone posting about the tension between brand versus performance or brand versus activation as if they're these separate things that fight with each other, when in reality, it's better together than just one. That's the point here. So the second thing here then is to kind of address this question of, well, then how do you do them both together? How do you split budgets? How do you execute brand and activation at the same time? There's really two things that I'll speak to here. The first is the so-called 60-40 rule that comes from the work of Binet and Field, which says that on average, 60% of your budget should go to brand and 40% should go to activation. That is a rough kind of average rule that I'd say that if you just took that and just did it, you'd probably get decent results. But there are things that you should factor in here to this budget split, such as your category. So basically, who are you up against in the category? Are you a challenger brand? How long have you been around, right? Like if you are the market leader, you can spend a lot more on brand. Immediate short-term targets are also going to be factored in here. You might need to slowly transition from like 90 or 100% performance and slowly transition to brand. So there's a lot of variables that go into what split you should have between brand and activation. But the very average rough rule is 60/40, and then that's going to depend again on where a company is across a variety of variables, and there's ways to figure that out. The second thing here to surface or talk about is the 95/5 rule, as it's been called, which just basically says on average, 95% of your market is not in market at any given time. It's not exactly 95%. In B2C, it might be a little lower because the buying frequencies of a direct-to-consumer category are going to be higher than in B2B. Just take, for example, toothpaste. I buy toothpaste about once a month, but I buy a CRM once every couple of years, right? So if that. Or in the consumer category or D2C category, if you look at automotive, for example, it's a little closer to like a complex B2B purchase where I'm not buying a car as I am like toothpaste because I'm not as wealthy as I would need to be in order to make such absurd financial decisions. So I'm going to buy a car maybe once every 6 or 7 years, maybe one every 4 or 5 years, right? Whereas toothpaste is once a month. And so in the B2B context, the 95/5 rule is really just describing an average that is in every category. To be clear, the average itself is not in every category, but the dichotomy between in market and out of market is in every category. Every category contains people who are either looking for the thing now because they've been prompted by some need or want, or they're not looking for the thing now. Okay, and that's where we derive long and short, emotional, rational. We can cover that too, but what I'm getting to here was the second way to kind of help you budget, which is understanding that for the majority of your market that is not in market, that can be spent on long-term brand building so that you are shoring up the people who will come to you when they have a need or a trigger. They are cued by something in their life and the environment to enter the category and buy from it. And the point here is that your brand comes to mind when that happens so that they bypass Google. Now, just in case they don't think of you and they go to Google, that's where the direct response comes in as well. But if you do the calculation for your category, and I have a tool for this, if you want this, DM me on LinkedIn and I will send you a copy. But it's a very simple tool that calculates the percentage of your market that is in market right now. And if you find that, let's say 90% of your market is out of market at any given moment and only 10% is in market, that rationally justifies only spending 10% on direct response. Why? What if we want more than that? Well, the answer is because you can't force someone to move faster than the environment and the variables of the environment and the person's internal and external states would dictate. You can't force someone to want something or need something more than is already the case. Now, physical availability helps someone buy faster. Like you can make it easier for someone to buy. Absolutely. That's the entire point of physical availability, essentially, is to just open more doors to your product. But you can't manufacture needs and you can't force someone or move someone down a funnel. That's not how it works. The funnel was invented by a salesperson like decades ago. It's not a validated heuristic for how reality works. It's just a model that's pretty inaccurate. So the point is you can't make people or force people have a need such that they're going to buy your enterprise software right now. So this is why spending more on direct response past the point where market demand is just a futile exercise because you're not going to get any more out of it than the market demand has already put on your plate, right? If there's only 10% of people who are in market for your product, if you spend above that, all you're doing is a really inefficient version of long-term marketing because those people aren't looking to buy now. So that's what I would argue. And so I think that the budget split of finding out how much of your market roughly is out of market and allocating your budget that way is quite financially defensible. So is the 60/40 split as well, because it is based on what I think is good research from Binet and Field and the IPA. So there is that as well. But whatever method you use here to budget and split brand versus activation, the point is you should do both at the same time. And if you're imagining like what a campaign plan would look like, it's like a picture a spreadsheet where the top row is your brand campaign and you're planning over a year. You would have one main campaign theme, maybe one or two, depending on your budget, and you might have different individual ads, but you essentially have one brand campaign running over the year that's this long. It goes from January to December, if that's your fiscal, and then below that, you have targeted segmented bursts of short term. So the short and the long happen together. The long pays for the short, excuse me, the short pays for the long makes the short work better. There's been a little bit of data on that in terms of people who already know a brand have higher conversion rates. I mean, we shouldn't even need data for that. That's just logically, de you can logically deduce that, I would argue. So that's the second piece there, which is how to do them together and how to budget for those. I think I've covered that. Now I want to address performance marketing and why this is the stupidest term to come out of the internet since the 90s. Now, I am exaggerating. There are many stupid terms. Performance marketing is just one of them. The main reason here is that this creates almost this dichotomy where you have performance marketing is the stuff that does the money, and then everything else is just dumb. As if the other kinds of marketing or marketing communications don't perform. It's absolutely bizarre. Performance marketing is in the same category of language as growth marketing and revenue market. It's all ridiculous. This is all just complete nonsense, okay? There's marketing as a discipline, and marketing communications is responsible for the communicative aspect of marketing, which includes advertising and includes organic social and includes everything where a business communicates to the market. Okay. And then there's all the rest of the all the rest of marketing as a discipline. But these terms like performance marketing and growth marketing and revenue marketing, it's all nonsense. All marketing, the marketing as a discipline produces future revenue, future profit, future value. All of it does that, right? It's all together. It's an orchestra that plays one symphony. It's not like you have one part of the orchestra that makes music and the rest of it just does what? Right? Like if performance marketing means anything, then what the heck do we think the rest of marketing is doing? Right? Like what and this, I think, is a lot of the perspective of certain executives is like you have this little pocket of marketing that generates leads and results and revenue, and then the rest just what? Like does what? What do you think the rest of marketing is responsible for? If performance marketing or revenue marketing or growth marketing is the part of marketing that brings in money, then what do you think the rest of marketing is doing? I mean, this is a completely absurd term, and I think it's done way more damage to the industry than anyone wants to admit. Now, I don't have data for this. I'm just kind of reasoning about this logically, which is that when we use the term performance marketing, again, we are kind of assuming that there's just one type of marketing that does performance, and then everything else is just non-performance by extension, right? Because if it's not performance marketing, then what is it? It's a completely ridiculous term, and it sets up this black and white where you have the stuff that performs and the stuff that makes me feel good. And this is nonsense. Long term, brand marketing should actually be emotional, but that's for neurological reasons. And that actually contributes to the bottom line via increasing pricing power and allowing you to skip Google by attracting people who already thought of you anyway. That's the point. But this idea, again, that you have like rational numbers over here and the fluffy, stupid, emotional stuff that maybe if we can't afford, we're not going to do it if we can't afford it. What, like, who cares? We're not going to do brand if we can't afford it because we need the money now. We got to get that revenue in the door now. So that's performance is going to do it. And this is the other stupid, completely nonsensical part of this problem is that because they work together, if you do performance only, you get worse results than if you were to do them both at the same time. You get better results anyway. So like this binary thinking is absurd and like it needs to be challenged. And I understand that in a lot of organizations, that's just not, that isn't going to happen right away, right? A lot of marketing, unfortunately, is politics, like any other function in a business. But for the love of God, man, like we need to step up our ability to be reasonable human beings here. So performance marketing is a ridiculous term. Just put it on the list of other nonsense terms like revenue marketing and growth marketing and all the other dumb stuff that marketers say. Number three here, like I said, is just to touch on some of the research or the data-backed body of information to use to justify brand marketing. In B2B, and this is actually the irony of the situation, is that I actually think that there's more of a compelling case to make for brand in B2B than there is in B2C. Now, ultimately, those distinctions are meaningless because we're all selling to human beings, but we still use them just for heuristic purposes to make sense of the world. And I say it's ironic because B2C has done brand historically for decades more than B2B. I mean, for the most part, B2B companies are still absolutely terrified to do brand marketing. They don't have the balls to do it because they're so freaking addicted to the short-term lead gen system, and SDRs and the sales and marketing org is incentivized on completely nonsensical stuff that is predicated on this idea that people will buy if you just shove enough ebooks down their throats. It's nonsense. And B2B as an industry is suffering very badly because they don't understand, and in a lot of cases, frankly, marketers don't have the financial and the academic knowledge to be able to go to the CFO, CEO, CMO, and say, here's the case for brand marketing. And so that's what I want to touch on now. The first one I've already mentioned it is Bennett and Field, right? So the long and the short of it, it's IPA publication, I believe, at least in partnership with the IPA. And so you can find that on Google pretty easily if you want a copy. I mean, I can send that to you as well if you DM me. But point is, it's publicly available, and it essentially breaks down hundreds of companies who Bennett and Field analyzed their advertising data to find and essentially measure the impact of short-term versus long-term advertising on business effects, which means the things that we actually care about, right? Not just leads. I mean, leads aren't even mentioned anywhere in it because business effects means revenue, profitability, penetration, market share growth, right? The stuff that actually matters to the business, right? The stuff that we're all here to move the needle on, which in so many marketing meetings on a daily basis, like no one ever seems to talk about, which is also mind-blowing. But that's the first one. There is research from Bennett and Field. The second one, and this is why I say that there's more, I actually think that potentially there's more of a defensible case for brand marketing in B2B than there is in B2C. I'm not saying that it's more important in B2B. I'm just saying that to play the devil's advocate, that there's actually, if anything, there's more reason to believe in brand for B2B. And the reason for that is what we know, or at least what we have really good data on about how B2B buying happens, which is that in B2B, the buying happens before the buying happens. What I mean by that is that about 86%, depending on the source, whether it's Bain and Company and Google, they did a study, whether it's the 6th Sense Buyers Report, there's data that shows or would seem to suggest quite strongly that about 86% or so of B2B buying is done, and the vendor that is purchased was a vendor that was already on the day one shortlist and is usually the first vendor on the day one shortlist, which means that when a B2B company moves into the category and buys from the category, they have a list of companies they already know, and they pick one of those like almost 90% of the time. The way that you get into that consideration set, the way that you're on the list of companies that gets considered is by doing marketing that markets to out of market buyers, because that's the only way you can get into the mind of those prospects. Performance marketing is terrible at mental availability because it doesn't have anything to do with changing memories or altering emotions, which is why the long brand building stuff should actually be, yes, believe it or not, emotional. That doesn't mean that it has to be sad or make you teary-eyed. There's lots of different emotions. You can use humor. You can use lots of different kinds of creativity to leverage emotion. But the reason emotion matters is not just like making me feel things, it's about getting into the mind of your buyer and associating a cue of some kind, a need, a buying trigger, a cue of some kind with your brand. And the best way to do that, really the only way to do that, is with long-term brand marketing targeted to the 95 or so percent of people in the market who are not actively in buy mode, right? And so and I've said this before, but if you're thinking about making the case to your leadership about why you should be spending so much on buyers who are not ready to buy now, the answer is because Google Ads isn't going to make them buy now. You cannot scale market share with Google search ads. It will not work. And I say that having been in the seat working with companies over and over and over again who are spending so much on Google Ads, and they think they're going to scale and grow pipeline with Google search ads. It's absolutely it's nonsense. It will not work. And the reason it won't work, again, is because of the way that B2B buying happens, which is a company has a need for a thing, then they make a list of the vendors they already know, and most of those companies will pick one of the vendors they already know without having to go to Google and click an ad and then get a demo of your software. And so by spending all of your budget on direct response, which is only going to convert people who are in market, you are spending all of your money on people on the fraction of your market, on the fraction, the absolute fraction of your market that is actively looking for your product. And not only that, you're spending all of that money in competition with every one of your other competitors who are doing the same damn thing. And so at the end of the day, if you think of a lake with the fish and you're trying to fish, there's 100 fish, five of them are in market. The others are not. So all of your competitors are going after these five fish, and there's all of the other fish that are going to come in market later. And for the most part, the companies that buy are going to buy from a company that they already know. And the reason that they already know the company is because the company was in their mind. And the reason the company was in their mind is because they'd heard of them already, because that company had got their brand into their mind via some touch point or collection of touch points. And the term touch point, I don't love it, but you get the point there. It's mental availability. This is the point. So, like I said, whether it's Bain and Company did a study in partnership with Google where they found that about 86%, I believe, of companies choose from their day one shortlist. It might have actually been 92%. I think it was 86% have a day one shortlist and 92% of companies choose from the day one shortlist. I think it was that, which is crazy numbers. There's also the 6 Sense Buyers Report, which would show the same thing, which is that you can't move people down a funnel. And for the most part, the brand that gets remembered in a buying situation gets bought. That's not to detract from the importance of product. Product matters a lot, but this is the point to justify spending on long-term brand efforts, because brand is not fluffy. It's not the coloring in department. It's not the meaningless, silly term that no one knows what it means. It's actually quite straightforward. Brand marketing, long-term marketing appeals to the percent of your market, which is most of it, that is not in market that will come in market later. It should be emotional and based on creating memories of the brand. That's what it should do. And then the short-term direct response stuff can be targeted to the parts of the market who are actively in market, and you should do them both together and at the same time. With that, I will wrap here. As I always say, if you think I'm wrong or you disagree or have a bone to pick, shoot me a message and come be a guest on the show. Otherwise, I hope this was helpful for you. If you have any questions or want me to hop on a call with your CFO to make the case for brand marketing, I will gladly do that and I'll do it for free. So shoot me a message on LinkedIn. Until the next episode, thank you for listening, and in this case, watching, and all of the best to you.